The airport was crowded. People walked fast, dragging their bags behind them. Some were laughing, some looked tired, and some were rushing to catch their flights. Among them walked a man in a neat military uniform. His name was Marcus Brown, a tall black man with kind eyes and a calm face. He had just finished his military service and was going home for the first time in 2 years. His daughter hadn't seen him since she was 6. Now she was 8. He held a small photo in his hand, his daughter smiling with 2 missing front teeth. He smiled softly as he walked to the gate. Just a few more hours, he whispered to himself. Marcus had a first-class ticket. It was a gift from a stranger who had met him at the airport cafe and thanked him for his service. The stranger insisted on paying the upgrade. Marcus didn't feel comfortable taking gifts, but the man had already left, so now he was walking toward first class. Feeling grateful but nervous, he reached his seat 3A next to the window. He placed his bag in the overhead bin and sat down quietly, folding his hands in his lap. He didn't want to bother anyone. Across the aisle sat a white woman in a fancy blue suit and expensive jewelry. Her name was Cynthia Blake. She looked up from her phone and noticed Marcus. She stared at his uniform. Her nose wrinkled. She leaned over and said loudly, "Excuse me, I think you're in the wrong section. First class is not for people like you." Marcus looked at her, confused. "I'm sorry. You probably meant to go back there." She pointed to a Kanya. "This section isn't cheap." Marcus stayed calm. "This is my seat, 3A. Cynthia raised her eyebrows. "Must be a mistake." Other passengers were now turning their heads. But Marcus didn't argue. He simply reached into his coat, pulled out his boarding pass, and showed it to her. "It's not a mistake." Cynthia rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. "This airline really needs to be careful who they let up here." A flight attendant named Emily walked over, smiling. "Everything okay here?" Cynthia pointed at Marcus. "Yes, please check his seat. I don't think he belongs here." Emily looked at the boarding pass. Then she smiled kindly at Marcus and said, "Yes, sir. 3A is your seat. Welcome aboard, and thank you for your service." Marcus nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Cynthia didn't look pleased. She leaned back in her seat and mumbled, loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Just because you wear a uniform doesn't mean you deserve special treatment." Sitting quietly in seat to B, just ahead of them, was a man in a plain black suit. He had short gray hair, strong shoulders, and sharp eyes. He had been listening to everything, every word. He didn't say anything, not yet. He just sat, watching, and made a small note on his phone. Back in first class, Cynthia pulled out her phone and called someone. "You won't believe who they sat next to me," she said loudly. "Some army guy, probably hasn't showered in days." Marcus heard her. So did others, but still he said nothing. He took out the photo of his daughter and stared at it quietly. Small tear rolled down his cheek. "Just a few more hours," he whispered again. A little boy across the aisle leaned over to his mother and asked, "Mommy, is that man a hero?" The mother nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, he's a soldier." The boy smiled and waved at Marcus. Marcus smiled back and gave a small wave. Cynthia scoffed. "Oh, please. These people want attention for doing their job." Emily, the flight attendant, returned with a glass of water for Marcus. She leaned in and whispered, "Ignore her. We all know who the real class act is." Marcus nodded. He didn't want trouble. He just wanted to go home. But the man in 2B was still watching, still listening. He pulled out a card from his pocket and stared at it for a long moment. It had a golden eagle on the top corner. He slipped it back inside his coat and pressed a button to call the attendant. When Emily arrived, he spoke quietly. "Let the captain know we may need to make an announcement before landing." Emily looked surprised. "Yes, sir." She walked away quickly. Cynthia was too busy checking her makeup to notice. She hadn't stopped talking since the doors closed. "I should have flown private," she said. "This airline is going downhill." Marcus kept looking at the window. The clouds passed by slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't fight back. But the people around him could see the pain in his eyes, and the man in 2B had a small smile on his lips, because Karma was already flying at 35,000 feet, and Cynthia, she had no idea who was watching. The plane was in the air now, flying steady above the clouds. Passengers in first class were relaxing. Some were reading, some watching movies, and some sipping cold drinks. But not Marcus. He sat quietly in seat 3A, hands on his knees, eyes on the small photo of his daughter. He hadn't said a word since takeoff. Across the aisle, Cynthia was still talking loudly. She scrolled through her phone, sighed often, and made sure everyone around her could hear her voice. "This is exactly why I avoid public flights," she said. "They just let anybody in here now." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one said anything. No one except the man in seat 2B. He watched her again silently, carefully. Attendant Emily walked down the aisle, holding a tray. She stopped at Marcus's seat and offered him juice. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" Marcus gave her a soft smile. "Just water, please." As she poured the water, Cynthia spoke up again. "Can I speak to someone about my seating arrangement?" Emily turned toward her. "Of course. Is there a problem?" "Yes," Cynthia said. "I paid full price for this seat. I expect a certain experience." She glanced toward Marcus without saying his name. It's just uncomfortable when people sit in first class who clearly don't belong here. Emily's smile faded. She looked at Marcus, then at Cynthia. Ma'am, all passengers in first class are here because they have the proper tickets. If there's something else I can help you with, yes, help me move to a different seat. Emily hesitated. There were no empty seats left in first class. She knew it. Cynthia knew it too. But Cynthia wasn't trying to move. She was trying to make Marcus move. Emily took a deep breath. I'm sorry, ma'am. We are completely full. Everyone is in their correct seat. Cynthia rolled her eyes and waved her hand. Unbelievable. So now we just lower our standards. Marcus looked down at his boots. He didn't want to fight. Not here. Not in front of strangers, so he quietly said, if it helps, I can move to the back. Emily's eyes widened. No, sir. You've done nothing wrong. Cynthia smirked. Of course he wants to move, he knows. Marcus shook his head slowly. I just don't want trouble. Emily stood straight. She looked at Cynthia and said firmly, there is no trouble except the one you're creating. The people nearby glanced up. A few nodded. The man in to be turned slightly and smiled to himself. Still, he said nothing. Still he watched. Cynthia narrowed her eyes. You'll regret speaking to me like that. Emily didn't answer. She picked up her tray and moved toward the front of the cabin. Marcus leaned back in his seat, eyes still on the clouds. He whispered to himself, I fought in war zones quieter than this. The man in 2B finally pressed the call button above his head. Emily returned quickly. Yes, sir. He spoke softly so others couldn't hear. Please inform the captain that everything is ready. Emily nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Then she added, she's still going. It's getting worse. The man's face didn't change. He simply replied, let her. Back in her seat, Cynthia pulled out a tablet and began typing angrily. Going to write a review. 1 star. This airline has no class. Marcus remained still, but in his heart, pain began to rise. Not just because of Cynthia's words, but because he had seen this before many times. In airports, in restaurants, in stores, people who judged him by his skin, not his service, not his heart. In that moment, the child from earlier came walking past, holding his mother's hand. He stopped beside Marcus's seat. Hi. Marcus looked up. Hello, young man. The boy smiled. Are you really a soldier? Marcus nodded. Yes, I am. The boy's eyes lit up. You're so cool. Marcus chuckled. Thank you. Then the boy did something unexpected. He saluted, just like he'd seen in movies. Marcus returned the salute, slowly and with respect. The whole cabin watched in silence. Even Cynthia turned to look, but she said nothing. As the boy walked away, the man in 2B finally stood up. He walked toward the cockpit, spoke with the crew for a moment, then returned to his seat. His eyes locked with Marcus's for a second, then with Cynthia's. She gave him a small, fake smile. He gave none back. 30 minutes later, the captain's voice came through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest on board today. Sergeant Marcus Brown, returning from overseas after 2 years of service. Cynthia's smile dropped. Wait, what? We are honored to thank him publicly for his bravery and sacrifice. Let's give him a warm welcome home. The entire plane began to clap. Even in economy, people stood up and applauded. Marcus sat frozen in his seat. His hands slowly rose to cover his mouth. Tears filled his eyes. The man in 2B now stood again, faced the cabin, and said in a firm voice, we thank him not just for wearing the uniform, but for showing patience, strength, and class even when others forget their manners. Now, all eyes were on Cynthia. She turned red. She looked around. People were staring. Some were filming. Her face fell. She looked at Marcus. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to, because the whole world had just seen the truth. The plane was still in the air, but the air inside had changed. After the captain's announcement and the long applause, the cabin grew quiet again, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, full of whispers, stares, and hidden thoughts. Marcus sat in his seat, unsure what to do. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. He never asked for it. He didn't fight for applause. He fought for peace. Across the aisle, Cynthia was frozen. She was no longer loud. She was no longer smirking. Her hands gripped her armrests, and her lips pressed tightly together. People were still looking at her, whispering quietly. Is that the woman who told him to leave? She embarrassed herself. Disrespectful. A young man behind her opened his phone. He had filmed her rude comments earlier. Just part of it, but enough. He began uploading the video to social media. With a simple caption, a soldier was disrespected. But watch what happens next. Meanwhile, Marcus sat still, holding his daughter's photo in his lap. He tried not to look at anyone. Not out of shame, but because he didn't want Cynthia to feel more embarrassed. Even after what she said, he still had grace in his heart. Whispered to himself, let it go. Just go home. See your baby girl. Suddenly, a flight attendant came by. Not Emily this time, it was David, another crew member. He bent down next to Marcus's seat. Sir, would you like to move to the front row for more space? Marcus shook his head. I'm fine right here. David nodded. If you need anything, just press the button. We've got your back. Marcus smiled slightly. Thank you. The man in seat 2B stayed calm. still silent, watched Cynthia carefully. She was now shrinking into her seat, trying not to make eye contact with anyone, but it was too late. Her words were out there, her behavior had been seen, and the passengers remembered. A woman, a few rows back, leaned forward and said to her husband, "She really tried to move him just because of how he looks." The husband shook his head. "Some people still live in the past." Another woman added quietly, and he stayed calm, didn't even raise his voice. People nodded. The whispering spread from row to row. Cynthia could hear it all. "That's the woman who judged him. She said he didn't belong in first class, but turns out, she's the one who doesn't belong." Marcus finally glanced across the aisle. Cynthia looked away quickly. He didn't feel anger toward her, just sadness. How many people still thought like her? How many soldiers went through this in silence? How many heroes were hidden just because of their skin? Suddenly, a small hand reached out from behind Cynthia's seat. It was the same young boy from earlier. He leaned forward and said, "Mr. Soldier, can I sit with you?" The boy's mom smiled. "Only if the nice man says yes." Marcus looked at the boy and nodded. "Of course, champ, come on over." The boy crawled into the empty seat next to Marcus. "Can I see your photo again?" Marcus showed him the picture of his daughter. "That's her. Her name is Maya." The boy grinned. "She's pretty. You're lucky." Marcus smiled wide, the first real smile all day. "Yes, I am very lucky." Cynthia turned her face toward the window. She didn't want to see this, didn't want to hear the laughter, but she couldn't block out the truth. Suddenly, Emily, the kind flight attendant, returned with a small box. She gave it to Marcus. "One of the passengers bought this for you. It's a thank you gift." Marcus was surprised. He opened it slowly. Inside was a small metal pen, a golden eagle with the words, "We see you. We thank you." He looked around to find who gave it, but no one said anything. Everyone just smiled. The man in 2B finally spoke. His voice was deep, calm, and full of weight. "Sergeant Marcus Brown, would you please join me up front for a moment?" Cynthia looked up, eyes wide. She finally realized who he was. Her lips moved silently. "Oh no." Emily whispered to her quietly, "You really didn't know who was watching, did you?" Marcus stood slowly and walked to the front with the man. He didn't know what was happening, but he trusted him. Passengers leaned forward, watching. Phones were recording. Everyone could feel something big was about to happen. The man turned toward Marcus and shook his hand. "Thank you for your patience. And for your honor." Then he turned to the cabin and spoke louder. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Colonel Thomas Green, head of National Military Protocol." Gasps filled the air. Phones were lifted higher. "This man beside me is not just a soldier. He is a decorated hero with 3 awards for bravery. He saved lives overseas. And today, he showed more strength than most people will ever understand." He looked toward Cynthia straight into her eyes. And while he remained silent, the world was watching. Cynthia covered her face. The cabin burst into applause, louder than before. This time, it wasn't just respect, it was admiration. Marcus bowed his head slightly and whispered, "Thank you." Colonel Green nodded. "No, thank you." The plane was still high in the sky, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere had completely changed. Everyone had seen it now. The soldier who stayed silent, the woman who judged, and the colonel who revealed the truth. Phones were still out. Some people were whispering, others were simply watching in quiet respect. But Cynthia, she was frozen in her seat. Her hands clutched her phone, but she didn't dare lift it. She kept her head down. The whispers were no longer behind her back. They were everywhere now. "Did you hear what she said before takeoff?" And to a war hero, shameful. Marcus had returned to his seat next to the boy who still smiled up at him. He felt a little awkward now. He wasn't used to all this attention. He looked at the boy. "You okay, champ?" "Yeah." The boy nodded. "I'm glad I sat with you. You're famous now." Marcus chuckled quietly. "Famous for sitting down and saying nothing. But that's what made you a hero," the boy said proudly. Those words hit Marcus hard. He closed his eyes for a moment. Sometimes, silence is stronger than shouting. In the front row, Colonel Thomas Green was on his phone. His voice was quiet, but his tone was firm. "Yes, I'll need press at the gate. No interviews. Just photos. I want the world to see this man come home." He looked back at Marcus. Then his eyes landed on Cynthia. She was now sweating, checking her phone nervously, like she was waiting for a way to escape. But the flight wasn't over yet. Flight attendant Emily walked through the cabin, gently asking people to prepare for landing. She reached Cynthia's seat and said politely, "Please return your tray table and sit upright." "Ma'am?" Cynthia looked up, eyes red. "Are people still looking at me?" Emily gave a small smile. "Yes, but not for the reason you think." "I didn't know he was important," Cynthia whispered. Emily paused. "You didn't need to. You just needed to be kind." Then Emily turned and walked away. The pilot's voice came on the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing in 15 minutes. Please make sure your seatbelts are fastened." Everyone got ready, except Cynthia. She was now fidgeting, biting her lip. Then she did something unexpected. She leaned across the aisle and spoke in a low voice. "Excuse me?" Marcus turned his head slowly. Cynthia cleared her throat. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Marcus didn't reply right away. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes weren't angry, just tired. "You don't have to say anything," he said softly. "No, I do," she whispered. "I judged you. I shouldn't have." Marcus gave a slow nod. "Thank you." The little boy next to him looked at Cynthia and asked, "Why did you say mean things to him before?" Cynthia didn't answer. She just looked down, her face burning. Marcus gently put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Let's just say, people make mistakes. And sometimes, they learn." Outside the plane, at the airport gate, reporters and military staff were already arriving. A large welcome home banner was being rolled out. Camera crews set up quietly, waiting for the moment. They didn't know exactly what had happened on the plane, but they knew someone important was coming home. Back in the air, Colonel Green stood up again. He addressed the first-class cabin with a calm but powerful voice. "Once we land, we ask that all passengers remain seated. There will be a special welcome for Sergeant Marcus Brown." He looked directly at Cynthia. "Everyone will exit after him." She looked away, but the message was clear. This time she would wait. She would watch, and so would the world. As the plane began its descent, Marcus looked out the window. He could see the city lights below. He thought about his daughter, Maya. She would be at the airport with a sign. She always made one, even when she was 5. She used crayons to write "Welcome home, Daddy." He smiled softly. "Almost there, baby girl." The wheels touched down. The plane rolled to a stop. Everyone stayed quiet. The captain's voice returned. "Welcome home, Sergeant Brown. You are cleared to disembark first." Marcus stood up slowly. He picked up his small bag. The little boy beside him gave him a quick hug. "Bye, soldier. Bye, champ," Marcus said with a smile. As he walked down the aisle, people clapped again. This time, softly, respectfully. He passed Cynthia. She didn't speak. She just looked down at her hands. Maybe this time, she had finally understood. At the front door, Emily stood with Colonel Green. They both saluted. Marcus walked out. And waiting outside, dozens of people. Flashing cameras, a little girl with big eyes, and a cardboard sign that said, "My hero is finally home." Marcus dropped his bag. He ran forward. Maya ran too. They met in the middle and hugged tight. She cried. So did he behind the glass. Cynthia watched from her seat. She saw the crowd. She saw the cameras, and she saw what real class looked like. It wasn't about money, or seats, or who boards first. It was about heart. Outside the airport gate, the scene was filled with cameras, smiles, and tears. Marcus knelt down as his daughter hugged him tight, her arms wrapped around his neck like she'd never let go. "Daddy, I missed you so much," she said, crying. "I missed you too, princess," Marcus whispered. The crowd around them clapped. Reporters snapped pictures. Soldiers in uniform stood at attention. But inside the plane, the passengers were still watching through the windows, especially Cynthia. She stared silently as the man she had insulted now stood in front of dozens of proud faces, his daughter by his side, his name being called with honor. The plane doors were still closed. Colonel Green stepped into the cabin once more. He faced the passengers. "Thank you all for your patience. You may now leave the plane." People stood up slowly, but no one rushed to the front. They gave space. Space for the moment. Space for reflection. Some nodded toward Cynthia as they passed her. Others gave her cold looks. She sat with her purse on her lap, her hands shaking slightly, as she finally walked out of the plane. Cynthia kept her eyes low, but the moment she entered the gate area, she froze. Because right in front of her, a TV camera was recording. Behind it stood a reporter with a microphone. "That's her," someone whispered. "The woman from the flight." Cynthia's eyes widened. No, don't film me." She turned her face away, covered it with her bag, and walked faster. But it was too late. The video from inside the plane had already started going viral. Thousands of people had seen her face. Millions more were about to. Back outside, Marcus stood with Colonel Green. As the crowd slowly parted, a man in a black suit stepped forward, a city mayor. He smiled and shook Marcus's hand. "You showed courage, Sergeant, not just on the battlefield, but in that cabin." "I didn't do anything, sir," Marcus replied humbly. "Exactly," the mayor said. "And that's what made the world stop and listen." Suddenly, a loudspeaker clicked on nearby. A woman's voice filled the terminal. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement today." The voice continued. "Sergeant Marcus Brown has returned home after 2 years of service overseas. Today, he reminded us that dignity speaks louder than hate. Please join us in honoring him with a city award for bravery and character." The crowd clapped loudly. Again, Marcus looked shocked. He had never wanted awards. But today was different. This moment was not about him alone. It was about every person who had been judged wrongly. Every silent fighter. Every quiet hero. Back near the wall, Cynthia watched everything. Her expensive makeup couldn't hide her regret. A few people looked at her and whispered. She wanted to disappear. She had insulted a man, and that man had shown the world how to act with grace. Emily, the flight attendant, walked by and saw her. She stopped for a second and said softly, "Next time, try kindness first." Then she kept walking. The ceremony continued. Marcus stood on a small platform. His daughter held his hand tightly. The mayor raised a medal and placed it around Marcus's neck. For bravery, both in war and in peace. The crowd cheered. Marcus looked down, humbled. He picked up Maya and whispered, "Going home now, baby." Just then, a reporter stepped forward and asked, "Sergeant Brown, do you want to say anything?" Marcus paused. The cameras were rolling. People were watching live. He looked straight ahead and spoke. "This isn't about me. It's about respect. Every person deserves kindness, no matter where they sit on a plane, no matter what they wear, no matter what they look like." He continued, "I served this country so we could all be treated the same. I didn't fight to sit in first class. I fought for equal class." There was a long silence, then an explosion of applause. Cynthia heard every word from the corner, and she felt each sentence like a stone in her chest. She walked away quickly, head down, but the sound of that applause followed her. By the end of the day, the video had hit 1 million views. Headlines read, "Humble hero silences hate with grace. Soldier speaks without shouting and wins the nation's heart. The woman who judged a hero and lost her voice in front of the world." But Marcus, he didn't care about the headlines. He was just happy to be home. Later that night, as he tucked Maya into bed, she looked up and asked, "Daddy, why did that lady say mean things to you?" Marcus smiled gently. "Because sometimes people don't see who you really are. But now everyone sees you," Maya said proudly. Marcus kissed her forehead. "I don't need the world to see me, Maya. I just need you too." The sun rose gently through the curtains of a small house on a quiet street. Birds chirped outside. Inside, Marcus stood in the kitchen, still wearing the same army jacket. He held a steaming mug of coffee and looked out the window. It was his first morning home in 2 years. Behind him, his daughter Maya sat at the table, drawing with crayons. She had already written "My hero" in big letters. His phone buzzed. More messages. More missed calls. TV stations, news reporters, people he hadn't heard from in years. "Can we interview you? Your story is everywhere. You're trending worldwide." Marcus sighed. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to be dad again. Meanwhile, across town, Cynthia sat in a hotel room. Her face was pale. Her name was now all over the internet, but not for good reasons. The video had reached 3 million views. Everywhere she went online, people were calling her out. Entitled woman insults war hero Karen caught live. Tries to kick soldier out of first class, humiliated by her own hate. Her inbox was full, but not with love. "You should be ashamed. Apologize publicly or disappear." Cynthia stared at her reflection in the mirror. "Who have I become?" Back at Marcus's house, Maya asked softly, "Daddy, are you famous now?" Marcus chuckled. "Maybe, but that's not what's important." "Then what is?" He sat beside her, being kind, even when people aren't kind to you, like the lady on the plane. "Yes," he nodded. "Just like her?" Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Marcus opened it slowly. Outside stood an older woman, white hair, kind eyes. She held a small basket. "Are you Sergeant Marcus Brown?" "Yes, ma'am." She handed him the basket. Your neighbor Margaret. I saw you on the news. Just wanted to say welcome home. And thank you." Marcus smiled, touched. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." "You're the kind one, son," she said. "You handled that better than I ever could." That afternoon, Maya wanted to play in the park. Marcus agreed. They walked down the street together, hand in hand. At the park, people recognized him, but no one asked for photos. They just smiled and nodded, a quiet respect. Later, as Maya played on the swings, Marcus sat on a bench. A teenage boy came over. "Excuse me, sir. Are you the soldier from the plane?" "Yes." "Can I sit?" "Of course." The boy sat quietly, then said, "My dad was in the army too, but he died last year." Marcus looked at him with soft eyes. "I'm sorry, son, that's hard." The boy nodded. "I saw your video. You reminded me of him.com/strong. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Your dad would be proud of you." The boy smiled, a little smile, but real. That evening, Marcus sat at his desk. Writing in a small journal, he wrote, "I didn't come back for fame. I came back for peace. And if my silence helped even one person think differently, it was worth it." Meanwhile, Cynthia sat alone in her hotel room, flipping through channels. Everywhere she looked, Marcus's face. But this time, something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was ashamed, and ready to make it right. She opened her laptop and began to type. A long message, not for the world, but for Marcus. The message read, "Dear Sergeant Marcus Brown, I'm not sure if you'll ever read this, but I want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. What I said on that plane was wrong. I judged you, and I had no right. Your calm response showed me more strength than I've ever known. You taught me a lesson I should have learned long ago. Not all heroes wear medals. Some just sit quietly and hold their dignity." She pressed send. Then she closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Change starts now." Back at Marcus's home, the message popped up. He read it slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just sat there thinking. Then, he replied with just 4 simple words. It had been 3 days since the flight. The internet was still on fire. The video of Cynthia's behavior had now reached over 10 million views. News stations kept replaying the moment she pointed at Marcus and said, "People like him don't belong in first class." and each time, the comments below were filled with, "She should be banned from flying. This is exactly what's wrong with the world." That soldier had more class in silence than she had in all her words. Cynthia hadn't left her hotel since landing. She stopped answering calls, stopped looking in mirrors. She didn't feel angry at the world anymore. She felt empty. On the morning of the 4th day, she got a message. It was from a young black woman who worked at the same company as Cynthia in the same building, different floor. Her name was Jasmine, and the message read, "I saw the video. I also saw you walk past me for 3 years without a smile. But I still hope you learn from this. Not for the internet, for yourself." That message hit Cynthia harder than anything else. Not for the internet, for yourself. She sat at the edge of the bed and stared out the window. She remembered how, as a child, her father always said, "We're better than them." Back then, she didn't even understand what he meant. But now, she did, and she hated it. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was fixing breakfast for Maya. He smiled as she danced in the kitchen, singing with a spoon in her hand. The piece was real now. He hadn't done any interviews. He didn't post anything online. He just wanted to live quietly. But today, that piece was about to be tested. His phone rang. He almost ignored it. But then, he saw the name, Colonel Green. He answered quickly. "Sir?" "Marcus, good morning. I wanted to ask something unusual." "Go ahead." "That woman Cynthia, she contacted our media office." Marcus froze. "What does she want?" "She says she wants to meet you. In person, no cameras, no reporters, just the two of you." Marcus was silent for a moment. "Why?" "She said she's ready to apologize, not with words, with change." Marcus looked at Maya, who was now drawing a butterfly on the fridge. "With magnets? All right," he said. "Set it up." "But just the two of us." The meeting place was a small public library in the city, quiet, neutral. Marcus walked in wearing jeans and a plain jacket. He didn't bring guards or reporters. He brought only his calm. Cynthia was already sitting at the back. She stood up quickly. When she saw him, her face looked older now, not from age, but from truth. She didn't wear heavy makeup this time, just plain clothes, tied back hair, and eyes full of regret. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I don't have much time," Marcus replied. "I understand." There was a long silence. Then Cynthia sat back down and opened a folder. Inside were papers, letters, and a small envelope. She pushed it across the table. "I wanted you to see this." Marcus opened the folder. The top page read, "Official resignation." Letter. His eyes narrowed. "You're quitting your job?" "Yes, I've worked in that company for 12 years. But I realized I was never the person I needed to be. I hurt people, silently. And now, loudly." Marcus flipped through the letters. Some were handwritten apology notes to her coworkers, the flight attendants, even Maya. One was to him. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Cynthia said, her voice shaky, "but I need you to know. I'm going to spend the rest of my life becoming better, not to be liked, but to finally live right." Marcus leaned back, quiet. Then he said, "You asked to meet in private?" "Because I don't want applause," she replied. "I don't deserve applause. I deserve silence and work." Marcus closed the folder and looked her in the eyes. "You hurt me. You judged me for my skin before you knew my name. I know. But you also showed the world a truth that needed to be seen. And now, you're facing it." He stood up. "That's a start." Cynthia looked up. "Can I ask one last question?" "Yes. What made you stay calm that day? How did you not yell at me?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because yelling never teaches, but silence. Sometimes it echoes forever." And with that, he walked away. Sat there long after he left, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't free from judgment. But now, she was walking the long road of change, and that was her second chance. 1 week had passed since the flight. The world had already moved on to new stories, new videos, new headlines. But for Marcus, peace had finally returned. He was home. He had his daughter. He had his silence back. And that meant everything. The fame, the applause, the news, it all faded. But the lesson stayed. At the local park, parents now greeted Marcus warmly. Strangers smiled and thanked him softly. Maya loved introducing her dad. "This is my daddy. He's a soldier." Everyone nodded with pride, but Marcus always said the same thing. "I'm just a dad." One morning, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Maya was still asleep upstairs. He opened his laptop to check emails. There weren't many now. No reporters. No requests. Just one message from a familiar name. "Cynthia." He paused, then clicked. The message was short. "I started volunteering today. At a veterans center. I don't want to be the woman from the plane anymore. I want to be someone my future self can be proud of. Thank you for listening when you didn't have to. You changed me." Marcus sat quietly. He didn't reply. Because he was angry, but because she didn't need words now. She was finally walking the path on her own. Later that day, Marcus and Maya visited the local school. There was a special assembly. The principal called Marcus to the stage. "We want to honor Sergeant Marcus Brown, not for what happened on a plane, but for how he carries himself every day." The children clapped. Marcus stood in front of them with calm eyes and a warm smile. He said, "I was judged because of How I looked, I didn't fight back with anger. I just stayed still and let truth speak for itself. He looked around the room, so many young faces. One day, someone may treat you unfairly, but you don't always need to shout. You don't need to hate back. You need to know who you are and never forget it. The room was silent. Even the teachers wiped their eyes. Back in her own quiet life, Cynthia now walked with more care. She listened more. She said hello to strangers and meant it. She stopped judging by clothes, by skin, by silence. She learned that the loudest lessons come from quiet people. Months passed. Marcus never chased attention. He never posted the video, never wrote a book, but the world didn't forget him because his silence had already said everything. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, Maya found the medal her dad had received. She ran to him, holding it up. "Daddy, why don't you wear this?" Marcus smiled. "Because I don't need a medal to be brave." "Then what makes you brave?" He lifted her into his lap, telling the truth, staying calm when it's hard, and always being kind. Maya nodded, as if saving those words in her heart. "Can I be brave like you?" "You already are," Marcus said, hugging her close. And somewhere far away, in a quiet corner of a city, a woman who once judged too quickly, now walked a little slower, spoke a little softer, and lived a little better, because one soldier, one look, and one moment of silence had changed her forever.